Hello, everyone. We're so glad you're here. I am delighted, honored, delighted to see that you are from all kinds of different places around the country. I see Indiana. I see, I see all kinds of. I just thought I'd say Indiana first because I saw that. But Reverend Mihee and I are delighted that you can be with us today. Friends, Mihee Kim-Kort is a Presbyterian minister. She's an agitator, I love that, a rabble-rouser, a speaker, a writer, and, quote, a slinger of hopeful stories about faith and church. Her writing and commentary have been found in Time, in BBC World Service, in USA Today, and HuffPost, Christian Century, On Being, Sojourners, and in Faith and Leadership. She's co-pastor with her spouse at the First Presbyterian Church in Annapolis, Maryland. She and I are both Presbyterian Church USA, and she's a fourth-year Ph.D. student in religious studies at Indiana University. Mihee, you have been speaking, saying, teaching, bringing us into important conversations, important truths. And so I'm grateful that you would spend some time with us tonight here at Middle Church. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this digital community tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I love Middle Church and the ministry that you have and you embody, and the church and community and vision that that you enflesh for all of us is just continues to inspire me all the time.
Thank you so much, Mihee. So I wonder, anti-Asian racism, anti-Asian violence, anti-Asian um, anger, wrath is not new. But for many of us, we're awakening to the reality of the fact that white supremacy in America knows no bounds and is not picky about where it turns its anger. And I just wonder, if I said to you as your student, what do you want to teach us today? What do you want us to know about Asian American history from your point of view?
Yeah, that's a great jumping off starting point for our conversation tonight. I mean, there's a lot about Asian American history that I think, first of all, gets erased from American history, U.S. American history in general. Even on Twitter today, I saw a call out from the current president of the Association for Asian American Studies. It was like, Asian American history and culture, all that. Yeah, it's great that we have it in college, in secondary education or post-secondary education, but we need to see it in K through 12 curriculum too. I certainly didn't learn anything or know anything until I was in seminary.
Really?
That was, after I graduated from college. This is maybe my second or third year in seminary. So 2003 at the earliest, I would say, where I encountered books like Yellow Ladies and, wait, is it Yellow? No, Yellow Girls, Dragon Ladies, like all these sort of different anthologies. Helen Jaw's Asian American Dreams, where I'm reading, I'm turning these pages like, this is what's been missing in my life for the last 20 some years. And I remember sitting in like a Panera or something reading and just crying because it felt like a huge gaping hole was being filled with all these stories, with these people, with with just faces that look like mine.
And you went to seminary where, Mihee?
Went to Princeton.
Yep.
Good, solid Presbyterian seminary. My dad also graduated from there too. Yeah. And that's where I met my spouse, Andy, and his father also graduated from Princeton. So we're creating some sort of a legacy, I suppose. But we keep joking with our kids, like, please, no one go to the ministry. We need somebody to take care of us in our old age. So,
Yes, do something else. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. NBA, like they all want to play basketball and football. So that's great. Rather you do that. But yeah, so I mean, just like learning the history of Asians in America, which, I mean, there's hundreds of years of history here. I mean, we can talk about the St. Louis World Fair in the early 1900s, where they had these, so-called living exhibits, where they were recreating these native indigenous villages. And the largest living exhibit was made up of 1,000 Filipinos from at least 10 different ethnic groups. And that immediately just set the tone for the sort of perspective on Asians in America, and what already as an object, already as something to be gawked at.
To have a living exhibit like that.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of people have heard of the Chinese Exclusion Act in sort of the mid to late 1800s, which was the first major federal law to bar a specific ethnic group from coming into the US. And even before that, then we have the Page Act, a little bit before that, that specifically targeted Chinese female immigrants. And it was really based on the idea that there was no reason for Chinese female immigrants to come to the US except to basically taint and to bring an unvirtuous kind of sexuality. So basically to ruin all the white marriages in the US. So there's all of this, and these are just, little sort of snapshots. I mean, we could talk about, of course, Japanese incarceration. We can talk about the American military interventions and wars in both Korea and Vietnam. And then just even today, all of this sort of a through line to the coronavirus, and how that rhetoric became so normal in the last couple of years, but especially in the last, in the last 4 years, but especially in the last year, in terms of people who are foreign and who are not white, and seen as either some sort of a disease, or as a virus, literally, or as some sort of contagion or a bearer of this disease. All of that is a through line to this whole trope of the yellow peril that began in the late 19th century. And it's that image of people who are a threat to the US American way of life. And therefore, there's this impulse and need to create these structures of containment. And so everything from certain housing codes, like in San Francisco, the cubic air ordinance in the 1880s as well, where they were literally just trying to keep Chinese immigrants in certain areas of the city. And then we've got Japanese Americans and Japanese people of Japanese descent also contained within these incarceration camps. So there's this sense of needing to scapegoat a particular anxiety and uncertainty, and have that be housed within a certain person. And that's the Asian in America. And so that containment has become just a very natural sort of part of understanding what it means to be American. It's to respond to some kind of a threat with violence, whether it's actual killing, whether it's the invisibilizing of Asians in America who are either who are domestic workers, sex workers, and then it's the continuous sort of accessorizing of Asians in America as like hardworking, definitely the model minority stuff. But now there's this sense of there's a lot more tropes around Asians in America being super smart, like a computer, like
good at math.
Yes, exactly.
And musical.
Yeah,
all violin and do math at the same
time. So yeah, I think that's a really clear sort of system of anti-Asian racism, like a very particular kind of racism. And it's useful to whiteness, and it's useful to who and what the US is as a nation and as a nation state.
What's the say a little bit more about why it's useful. Just why is it useful to white America?
White America, its identity is that its identity has to be constituted by what it's not. And so we have anti-Blackness for sure, and we see anti-Black racism completely embedded within the legal structures of the very founding of this country, all the way through to what we see with mass incarceration and police violence. And then there's that through line to Asians in America being used to either as a model minority to kind of showcase what it's like to be white and assimilated, what it means to be in proximity to whiteness. And then on the other side, sort of this kind of twinning happens with this, and it's tied to that yellow peril narrative as well, the perpetual foreigner syndrome, where there is, if you're not assimilated, you're othered, you're foreign, you're exotic, or just a complete threat, and something to be eliminated. And so I think that there's something about the U.S. needing the nation state needing particular bodies to constitute the lines around its own identity and perpetuate its own power. So it's all kind of like a weird tapestry, like a very ugly tapestry for sure. It's not something that I would want to be a part of creating, but we're all implicated. We're all sort of these cogs in this kind of machine that upholds and perpetuates this, unless we speak out, unless we disavow, and resist.
And you've been doing that, Mihee. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for your New York Times op-ed. Thank you for the spaces where I've seen you. I saw you talk to, my brain just went away. One of your dear friends on Insta Live the other day. I peeked in and listened.
With Austin,
that
yes.
Was Austin Channing. That was a really beautiful, vulnerable conversation you both had. Let me just ask you another kind of question. I want to get a little bit more personal with you about your own story. But before we do, what's there's like a kind of fetishization, kind of objectification, right, of Asians as the model minority. And then there's also, but you're not white, othering. How hard is that for you as a people, your family now? How hard has it been for you to live in that in-between space? Not white enough to be white, maybe not brown enough for brown people to continue an ally? Is that a fair question? Maybe? And I'm gonna turn a light on, forgive me. It's dark in my house. I'm like, what happened? I don't know, lose me. Oh, so can you talk a little bit about that being in between, if that's fair?
Yeah, no, that is, I mean, I think it took a long time for me to acknowledge and recognize that that was, part and parcel of our experience. My family and I immigrated here when I was just a baby. So they will tell me stories now. And I remember hearing and seeing some things growing up in terms of this continuous sort of tension between working so hard and doing everything that we're supposed to do to be assimilated, to be accepted, to be, even after we were naturalized as citizens. I mean, that language is so provocative to me. Naturalized, yeah. As citizens, doing everything we were supposed to do. We were Christians. We grew up in a Presbyterian church. We were at church every Sunday.
You tell people from where they might not know. From where?
Oh, yeah. Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yeah.
So the Christian capital of the world is what I always say because of all the different organizations there and military bases, and Colorado Springs is just a very interesting spot. But so having that, but then always having these moments where we knew that we did not, it was very clear that we did not we weren't seen as quote unquote American. Even, up until last year when I was still walking around on campus at Indiana University,
Mm.
doing that program, I would still get asked if I was an international student. That happened to me a couple of times in seminary. So little things like that, everybody talks about microaggressions. It's funny to kind of delineate micro and macro because they all kind of bleed into each other a little bit for me, I think. But, and the things that my parents also went through and never really talked about and didn't respond to because we were just supposed to kind of keep our nose down, keep our heads down and keep our nose to the grind. Is that how you say that? Yeah,
I
one
think
of
so.
the
Goes to the
yeah.
grindstone.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I'm really not good at that.
I'm terrible at idioms.
Terrible at
Um, so yeah, so we were supposed to just keep our heads down. And so like to watch Minari, and to see some of the interviews afterwards. I mean, like I could not stop crying. Like from the first moment that I saw the trailer to watching the movie throughout, and then even seeing some of the interviews afterwards and realizing that, yeah, there were just such different sort of generational expectations. Like I think my parents never expected to belong
Hmm.
or to be accepted. I think that was maybe sort of the case for a lot of that immigrant generation. But the second generation, like my generation, we were doing all these things that we're supposed to do, you know, to try to be successful, to try to be contributing members of society. But there's no way to sort of shake off just, all the particular kind of moments of just a reminder that either we're an object that is supposed to be sexually available for you, um, as an Asian female in America,
Yeah.
or just like this robot or automaton or this object without any feelings. Um, and that continues. And so like, how do I contend with this, continuous sort of burgeoning awareness of that and being able to give language to it? I really rely on other people and their stories and the way that they bring that to life. A lot of people are talking about Kathy Park Hong and
Yeah.
Minor Feelings, which just, I read that as soon as it came out, and am reading it again with a group of ladies. And it's just, it's doing so much work for me, so much healing work, so much kind of coming to terms kind of work for me. And there's so much out there right now that I think is doing exactly that. And I feel super grateful for that.
Can you make the history of your family a little more, can you foreground it for us? Just, your parents came here. Why? When was that?
Yeah.
What was their backstory, Mihee, that made them want to come to the United States? Can you put some flesh on your story for us?
Yeah. So from what I understand and what they've been willing to share with me, they always started out saying, we came here for you. We came here because we knew that there were going to be better opportunities, education wise, career, occupation, success wise, like there would just be more for you to do. And I never totally understood that. And I see now that, like my dad was born during the Korean War.
Yeah.
He had a sibling, he actually had a twin who died from either disease or starvation, but there were, 4 other siblings in his family.
Wow.
And my mom was born after the Korean War ended, but the aftermath, like the more that I read about it these days, the aftermath of it, I just can't even begin to fathom. So there's this sense of like, I wonder if they came here wanting to, it may have been like, I wonder if there was a mix of like wanting to leave some of that behind, some of that trauma,
Mhm.
some of that that suffering and that violence behind. And then at the same time, yeah, they got caught up in the American dream, this hope of being able to have a life where they felt like they could take care of themselves and their kids. And so we immigrated here, and
What year
we
was that, Mihee? What year? What year did they come?
1978,
Mhm.
maybe 1979. It was a little bit after I was born.
Okay.
And they just sort of jumped right in. My dad was working at a movie theater. My mom stayed home with me and then had another baby, my younger brother. My dad was going to school at night to get another degree. I mean, they did so many jobs. My mom started working at one of those electronic assembly, they solder these tiny little microchips. She spent a couple of years doing that with a number of ladies from our church. They owned a few businesses and tried to do that. And I remember helping them, working in the shop, taking phone calls. They had a sandwich shop. My mom had sort of a clothing business for a while. They tried to do all these things.
Yeah.
And it really was like a whole life was just sort of wrapped up in work and me and my brother growing up and going to school and then church.
Right.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah.
And your dad's a pastor too, right? Your
Yeah.
dad.
He became a pastor later in life. So he
Yeah.
went second career.
Yeah.
He eventually became like a finance person for digital before it became Compaq, before it became Hewlett Packard. I think it went through
Right.
a Quantum or something. And there was a couple of iterations of that computer company.
Yeah.
And there were just little stories here and there, just about comments about what we looked like and what we sounded like and how nobody, I mean, we were like always having to translate, but I wasn't really translating. I mean, I really was just like, what would often happen, I remember was like a cashier would ask a question and my mom would respond, but they wouldn't understand it. So then I would have to say it for them again in English, but my mom was saying it in English.
Right.
So there was always this sort of wall, this kind of, we weren't totally intelligible ever. There was always this kind of like, they would see us and like not hear the words that were.
Even if you were speaking English words, they couldn't hear you. They couldn't hear
Right.
your,
Right.
past your, I don't know, look, your accent, your,
Yeah.
you say, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know when. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that somebody still is like, to me, your English is so good.
No, are you kidding me?
No, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, maybe like a handful of years ago, like, oh, you don't have an accent kind of thing. So those things are persistent, and I'm not sure, yeah, what else to say about that, but my parents still
When did
contend
you
with that.
know? When did you know? When did you know that there was, like I imagine a little Mihee with your brother and you're moving in the world and maybe something's happening, but like when did you know, oh, this is about how I look, or oh, this is about me not looking like them? Do you remember that story of when you had that kind of sense that it was about race or ethnicity, or do you remember?
I mean, it was when I was really young, it was the slanting of the eyes
Hmm.
and the ching chong songs.
Like people did this. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah. And it was children, it was adults, it was, I mean, from a young age, seeing that, but not really having space or awareness, or even my parents would, just kind of try to ignore it, but didn't really give any kind of language to me to respond to it. It was just like, that's what it is. But it was a reminder that we were marked as different.
Yeah.
And yeah, that continued on. And so I think that, and this probably, I'm sure, I know that there's studies that have been done on second generation, kids who totally try to disavow and ignore and avoid their heritage too, who reject. And I think that was me for a while. I mean, even though we were fully entrenched in a Korean immigrant Presbyterian church, which, I mean, like in the Presbyterian denomination, Korean churches are like, it's like
Good
stepping,
point.
yeah, stepping into another world.
Right. That's right.
But then, that was just on Sundays for me. So it was easy to compartmentalize, my life in that way. The rest of the week, it was just like, I'm not Korean and I don't want to be. I don't want people to know or to associate me with that. I think in high school, I started to try to open up a little bit more and let folks know. But, it was still like there were always still really horrible, weird moments, just like when some of my friends did meet my parents for the first time, like it was a lot of, oh, your parents are so cute. They're like toy parents. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember like thinking, oh, that's nice. And I told my dad that, and he was so mad. He was just like, I am not a toy and I'm not cute. I'm like 45 years old.
Grown-ass man.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't need to say the S word, but seriously.
It was this constant infantilizing, this constant, and I think that that's connected to the sort of objectifying.
Yeah.
It's a way of diminishing.
I'm interested, Mihee, in your dad being cute and like a Black dad being menacing or something. Like your dad is cute and was my dad scary? Like that thought just popped in my mind about the different ways that whiteness has objectified those of us who are not white, like different buckets of objectification, right?
Yeah.
Over-sexualized, scary Black man,
Yeah.
fast Black woman. I think that's something Asian women and Black women get to have together, fast and sexually free or something. But it's fascinating to think about the tools used to diminish us. The same source, but different, like say tactics, would you say, to diminish us, right?
Yeah.
Just including like this, I'm not going to laugh at this, but I just remember when I was a little kid, we were Air Force brats. Was your dad in the military? Is that, no, did your dad do military?
No, not in the US military, but in Korea, they all have to serve for 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you would have been in high school in the mid-90s, or am I right about, am I doing that math right? Late 90s?
Yeah.
Oh, well, listen, okay. I graduated from high school in 1976, okay? Don't anybody tweet that out, but oh my God.
That's impossible. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm like bicentennial. Everything was red, white, and it was kind of scary, me. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
But like I'm thinking about some in the mid-90s, like where was the Rodney King story in your story? Can you just do a little kind of like time travel for us? Or what was the public, let's say Asian horror, when you were in high school? And what was the public Latinx or Black horror? Can you recall? What would have been the stories going alongside your high school life is what I'm wondering.
Yeah. The only conversation I remember, I remember just being horrified. I remember the images. I remember being horrified by, I mean, it's images we see all the time now.
Like that beating of him in the street.
Yeah.
20 years older than you, which I just can't even believe I said that, but it's true. But I couldn't ingest it. It was terrible, right?
Yeah. And I remember feeling like, why isn't the church in general? Because the church was like supposed to be my moral compass.
Yeah.
Like, why weren't they more outraged? So the larger church, I guess, like the denominational maybe I just, like growing up again in a Korean immigrant church, like I wasn't really totally aware of like the larger denomination. But certainly my own church didn't start talking about it until the riots, until Korean businesses were
Yeah,
destroyed.
right.
And then I remember, and my parents, they would, like again, we're not trying to make waves or make trouble, but that's the first time I heard anti-Black sentiment. Like, how could these Black communities, these Black people destroy Korean businesses that were there for them, that were supporting them?
Right.
And I remember being super confused and um, thinking like, well, something horrible happened and
Right.
they're not talking about it. This man was beaten to death and by the police, people who were supposed to protect us. So there were so many questions about like these structures of protection and stability and security that all of a sudden they were all sort of just kind of crumbling down from understanding police to the church to my parents.
Mhm.
But then, like then I'm thinking like, I see this sort of pain in my parents' eyes when they're talking about this,
Right.
um, as if it's like evidence again of how they don't belong.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
I remember like trying to sympathize with them, and I did sympathize with them because they owned businesses, and I'm sure could imagine what it would be like if somebody came in and completely burned it down, burned any of them down. Um, but there was always something at the pit of my stomach because one of my best friends at the time um, was a Black boy named Shelby.
Shelby. That's a good name.
Yeah. I actually ended up moving away from that school and district, but then came back to be in high school with everybody. So actually, wait, when did it happen? I think I was in middle school when it happened.
Okay. Mhm.
Um, and um, it was just hard. I mean, because you have this person in your life,
Yep.
and then you have people talking very in abstract ways
About they.
about,
They.
yeah,
Yeah. The beautiful pronoun they. Right.
yes, yeah.
They.
And so I was so confused. And I just remember feeling super hurt and feeling like um, I didn't have language. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Um, but, we were in a predominantly white school. And again, I don't think people were talking about it. And I don't know if that's just being in Colorado and Colorado Springs or what, but I remember Challenger when that blew up. That
Yeah.
was a
We
big
talked
deal.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, you know, I'm trying to think, my my sort of young adult experience of that, and of course I'm going to draw a parallel between that sort of Rodney King beating and the things that we've seen, Mihee. I the J train in New York and that beat down. Oh my God! Like, and the old woman outside. Just the I'm a girl who can't. I can hardly watch. I can hardly watch the sci-fi movies if there's going to be some, somebody eating somebody or beating somebody. And so the
Yeah.
real life, no kidding, flesh and blood violence just makes me nauseous. So to think about the rage, me that sorry, allergic, that would cause that kind of beatdown, the kind of white rage, and were brown police officers out there. The
Hmm.
kind of rage that causes that, the kind of rage that causes Derek Chauvin to put his knee, on George Floyd's neck,
Hmm.
and the kind of rage that causes the kind of violence that we're seeing against our Asian siblings now. So I'm wanting to just turn a little bit to, like, there's little Mihee, there's middle school Mihee kind of looking at the world and going, oh my God, what is this? I'm confused. And you're an adult person bringing those stories with you to this moment. We're all adult people on this call bringing those stories to this moment. And that's the work I do about the way stories shape us and shape our empathy and our reactions. And so I'm just wondering, I kind of want to say something like, how traumatized are you when you experience what's happening today? And you and I could do, we both could, with your almost PhD in mine and our theology, we could like get real abstract about all of these things. And people would learn, but I want people to understand love the way it feels inside you as a human being who was a child, right? And a young one, a teenager and a young adult. And now to see what's happening in the world. How does that how does that traumatize your body and how does it hurt your soul?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think that for a long time, I think about containment again. There's a lot where we try to, for me, this has been sort of a survival kind of mechanism to sort of hold and contain that that fear, that pain, that suffering, that trauma, to just kind of hold that apart from me and sort of kind of dangle it away from me, like sort of keep it at arm's length. Um, and I think those moments when I am able to, like, I'm not a crier. So I cried a lot when the kids were born because of the hormones. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing. Oh my gosh, I would cry at everything. Like, somebody would bring over, like something, and I would just start bawling. It,
Here's your here's your casserole. Okay, thank you.
I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
somebody brought us over like this beautiful frame of all our our dog who died 3 years ago. But so at the time she was like 5 years old, and it was like these framed beautiful like black and white photos of her, and she drove me crazy. She ate everything in the house, and I wasn't sure how I really felt about her. But she showed up with this, and I just
Yeah.
started crying so hard.
Funny.
I think that my mom cries really easily, and that's something I wish that I had inherited from her. Um, she she doesn't say a whole lot unless she's super pissed about something. Then
Mm,
she'll talk for hours. But if there's grief or sadness, I remember when our dog died, when she did die 3 years ago, and it was sort of unexpected. And we came home from the vet, and I remember going up, and I had been bawling at that point, but had stopped. And then I'd gone up to, my parents were with us, and I'd gone up to their bedroom and opened the door, turned on the light, to let them know we were home. And she could see that I'd been crying. And then she started crying again because she knew,
oh,
she just felt that pain and was able to reflect it back to me in a way that again, a gift that I wish I had inherited from her. But when I see any of those kinds of, like you, I do, yeah, like I can see it in movies or whatever. There's just, in my brain, it's very loud, like this is not real, even though it looks what incredibly real. But like when I see any of those, and I don't watch those videos, like the video of the woman that was beaten most recently.
yeah, outside of the apartment complex in New York.
Yeah, I couldn't, because then you feel it. Just hearing the words and knowing, and even just seeing the still shot, I
Right.
could feel it in my body. I could feel it, imagining it, like that it's in the body of, and like happening to my mother or to a close friend or to my daughter. And that's, yeah, that's where it's at. But I just, I think the way that it does come out is anger.
Yeah.
And that's how depression has always been anger for me. It hasn't ever been sort of sadness or exhaustion, like postpartum for me. And I still feel like I'm in postpartum depression even 10 years after and the twins were born. It's still just anger, super fucking angry right now at everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I heard you saying to Janet, to I mean, the anger you said, I had to write because I'm so angry, and you had to write it out, right? You had to
Yeah.
write the story. So there's a couple questions in the chat, and I want to get to chat questions, but the one that I just saw that is one that I'm curious about as well is this kind of like, so I'm going to tell you like a really quick, two quick stories, right? My
Mhm.
brother was in the army. He's an army general. And I made it my business, Mihee, to go wherever he was because I didn't have any niece. I had only one niece and nephew then, and whoever they were, I wanted to be. So I went all over the place, uh,
Mm,
including Mainz, Germany, and including Seoul, Korea,
mm,
where he was stationed. And I got to go really close to the DMZ with him.
mm.
And I mean, it was wild. So Korea was a wild visit. I was single. He and his wife were there. We did crazy, wild Seoul, Korea things. From it was insane. Crazy good food,
Mm.
crazy shopping. Like get your Matrix big black leather coat made and be able to afford it. I mean, it was crazy. It's crazy town, and also like the incredible karaoke,
Mm.
and incredible hospitality. And I'm remembering the flight to Korea. This is my sister-in-law calling me. Interesting. I said your name and I can't talk to you. I remember the flight, and I had like this great um, ticket in American Airlines, like front class, like business class, not first class, but front business class, but in the middle of this big row. But that was cool, lots of room. And there were these incredible neighbors around me trying to help me order. We couldn't speak
Mm.
language. Nobody had language, but I had these mommies and these aunties, girl, eat this, type thing. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What are you saying? But it was like beautiful. And then somebody stole my wallet and had $400 in it. But other than that, it was just a really beautiful flight. Yeah, way back in the long time ago.
Oh, goodness.
So the story one was my experience in Korea was so, I mean, I love traveling, Mihi, and it was
Mm.
so like um, kind. I mean, kind. I was exotic and black. My brother was black like me and exotic, and his wife is black, and we were all like exotic trio, bipping and skipping around. But like people were so kind and they were so hospitable. So story one. Story two, my husband and I went to China 5 years ago. He's white. We went with two white friends. So it was me, Negro, and the white people, like running around China. That was interesting. All over the place. Everywhere you could go in China that you're supposed to go, we went. And like I had these aunties then trying to pull my hair and whatever. So all of that still like kindness. But I have to say, in the United States, occasionally, I have experienced some feeling from some Asian people that I'm just a little too black,
Yeah.
like a little too dark, a little too something. Like the feeling of what black is. Like I say when I'm doing my work, me, it feels like anti-black racism got exported around the globe. Like
Mm.
we are not going to like black people. The black people in Cape Verde don't want to be black Americans, right? That's how much anti-black American racism got exported to China, to Korea, to Thailand, to Indonesia, to Paris, to like everywhere. Just don't be a black American.
Mm.
I have experienced that. And I wanted to know if you've experienced that, like in your life as a wonderful, smart Korean second generation person. Do you experience Asian people having some anti Black, except for, like the kindness that also, but like, do you experience that as a reality in your world of smart people, educated people?
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think that um, something I'm noticing as more and more Asian American folks in my generation, people who are in the church, who are clergy, a lot more people are talking about this anti-Asian, this sort of racism that's happening.
Right.
Um, and I can't help but wonder, like, why are they only now talking about it? Like they're talking about it now, when, I mean, for me, I think the moment that sort of solidified this horrible nightmare that is the American dream
Yeah.
was Trayvon Martin. We had just moved to Bloomington.
Mm.
The twins were 2 or 3 months old. I just saw Trayvon as another baby just walking around,
Yeah.
and it just did not make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, And I see that still in really insidious and subtle, maybe not in overt ways, but in that language, in the avoidance, in not talking about the complicity that so many people have in this system, the structure that like literally makes us think and see and talk a certain way
Right.
when it comes to Black people.
Yeah.
And so again, my only reaction, I gotta come up with some other maybe feelings or something. But when I see these, I'm like, great, I'm glad certain Asian Americans are coming to some consciousness about racism. And
You're like,
that,
yeah.
yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Where were you when, when Trayvon Martin was murdered and when Michael Brown was murdered and Akai Gurley? Oh, I can't even start with Akai Gurley with.
No, you got to go way back to, well, you got to go back to Rodney King getting his ass whipped. And sorry, we might have to go back to, we might have to go all the way back to
Yeah.
lynching, right? And so, as a woman of a certain age, I've watched the civil rights conversation, happen when I was too young to get in it, when Ruby Sales and those guys were doing their thing in Lowndes County and whatever. I know those stories, right? And he from news and watching Walter Cronkite or whatever. But I was born in 1959, I say, and hope that they'll delete that. So when I think about all this rolling narratives of just, right, the girls bombed in the church and the, king killed on the balcony and the rising of the Black Panthers, but the killing of a man and his wife in their bed, shot to death, right? Like, just it's like story after story after story after story. And someone asked me one day, Mihee, they were like, have Asian people been in the civil rights movement? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And also some Asian people, like let's not make a blanket, have been standing by going, some that's terrible, or some not, or some silent. And I say to younger people, I think whiteness causes that. I think whiteness, as that trope of white supremacy, causes silence rather than solidarity. Causes maybe a kind of puzzled observation rather than let me get in here and whip some butt because y'all are crazy. So just tell me, when you hear me say that, what does that feel like inside you in terms of like your own experience or the experience of your colleagues and friends? And then also maybe a little bit about colorism. Like when I went to China, my China story is the black market of the face cream to get light. So what's your sense of how no, Mihee, I'm not trying to say all the Asian people are the same, or you can speak for everybody. So I'm saying your experience of where people have gotten in the movement, where they haven't gotten in the movement, how they feel about Blackness, just from where you sit.
Yeah. I think there's still a sense of, I think today looks like cultural commodification. There's a sense of, there's a certain cachet if you can, use the vernacular and you can dress and you have the certain kind of affect of it. And we see the sort of co-opting of it.
Affect of Blackness or affect of activism? I'm so sorry.
Oh no,
affect of Blackness.
Of Blackness, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I think that, and this is all just thinking about like really my parents, honestly. I don't know why they're like my main point of reference. They're probably
your parents. Yeah.
They're probably not the best point of reference. But
how old are your parents?
My dad was born in 1949 and my mom was born in 1954.
Okay.
So
they're boomers.
Yeah. So I think there's a sense of like, I remember playing the first time I discovered like K-pop and rap and all that, like Koreans rapping. And I remember playing the music for my parents and they were like, we don't know what they're saying. And it was in Korean. And I was like, but they're speaking in Korean. So I think there's still this sense of like Blackness is always going to be less than.
Mhm.
So even though Black culture is such a huge part of, music, movies, all that right now, a
Right.
lot more present and represented, um, there's still a sense of like it's not like the exceptional that should be pursued
Right.
or copied or replicated or whatever. And so yeah, I think it's about whiteness. Like there's still going to people in general are still going to um, uphold standards of whiteness, which is um, yeah,
Light, blonde.
yes, yeah, certain kind of success, a certain kind of um, yeah, certain kind of you know bodily appearance, certain kind of suggesting a certain kind of ability.
Right.
um so there's always, I mean, like we're caught up in this structure of these binaries, I guess. I mean, I think we've been talking about binaries to death for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
but um
Yeah.
that's how people operate, I think, for the most part.
It's
And it's
simple.
scary to not
Simple.
operate that way, to be in the gray and the ambiguity.
That's right. It's simple. It's simpler to be in the binary, and it's less complicated to be in the binary.
Yeah.
Someone was intrigued by the comment about whiteness, and let me just say one more sentence about it, and maybe we're going to ask folks to ask us some questions, me. But like
Mhm.
when I say whiteness, folks, I mean white supremacy. I just know that when I say white supremacy, somebody's going to stop listening. But if I say whiteness, they're like, "Oh wait, what do you mean?" So I
Yeah.
mean whiteness as a construct, friends. I
Mhm.
mean, whiteness as a trope. I mean, whiteness as a fallback position. I mean, whiteness as a way of knowing, a way of being. It's ontological,
Mhm.
right? And I think, like, if me and I were like having our next talk over a glass of wine, we might get all the way to how it is true that some of our Asian siblings have been ontologically white, and there's some Black people that are ontologically white. That kind of way of being, knowing, this is the code, this is the success, is what I mean by that. And
Mhm.
whiteness is so powerful in our nation, right? White supremacy, whiteness as a construct is so powerful that actually little children, friends, with my psych hat on, get baptized into how to survive whiteness. Little Black children and little white children and little white children get baptized into whiteness. Ask Tim Wise, how white do you have to be to be white enough?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. That whiteness can silence folks. You think about, um, uh, the bystander. I'm going to just say the bystander of an act of violence, and like the one who closes the door,
Ugh.
right? Who
Mhm.
closes the door? If that's a Black person that closes the door, I'm theorizing whiteness causes us to close the door. There's a way in which whiteness gets inside all of us and makes us behave in ways that are not of the Ubuntu village, are not of our ethnic upbringing,
Mhm.
is my thought. What do you think
Yeah,
about me? Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think when white people sometimes hear whiteness or white supremacy,
Yeah.
they feel, I think that it's like a personal
Yeah.
kind of so it can be personal, and white people have a much closer relationship with whiteness, but non-white people can as well, and non-black people have can have some proximity to blackness, and some, I mean, some brown people, some Asians, I mean, we can talk about blackness and whiteness not just being simply a personal identity marker, but that these are systems, and that whiteness exists and operates because it's anti-Black.
Yeah, that's right. That's really well said, Mihi. That's really well said. Who wants to? So, do you want to take some questions?
Sure, yeah.
I don't mean, I'm not trying to turn a sharp corner. I was gonna make a segue after I said that. Do you want to take some questions? So I want to say I could talk to you for hours about this, and I hope we can some more. I think the deeper conversations, Mihee, are how do we as, a younger Korean sister and an older Black sister, just as examples of being people in the world, where are the places where we all collaborate, right? Where's the places where we set a table of truth telling? I'm sorry, I'm just allergic, guys, not COVID. But I
Good.
wanted Mihee to talk about your story because the stories really change us.
Mhm.
And the stats are stories and the history is a story, but you inside the history is a different story, right? Than in 1949. Like, it's like, where were your parents in 1949? Where were you in 1992? So thank you for letting me talk about that a bit. And I don't know if my team, I see raised hands. The questions in the raised hand. Nope, they're over here. Okay, we got that. Ask us, who's got a question? Hi, Patty. Patty raised her hand.
Yeah, I can unmute people if people raise their hands and
Does that feel okay, Mihi? Do you want to hear the voices of the folks asking the questions, or do you want our team to tell you what the question is?
No, that's fine. Yeah, if it's
Yes.
whatever is easier for people.
Okay, Ben, go for it. Thank you.
Patty, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Patty. And then there's just always like, will my unmute work, right?
Yeah, that happens to me all the
Will that
time.
happen? I'm good. Well, Patty's getting off mute. Okay, we got that one. I'm looking in the chat because people do that. Yeah.
There's a lot here. I didn't
Okay,
even
so
realize.
you can put your question in the chat. I'm just going to look through here and see. Patty, we're waiting on you whenever you're ready, my love. Come to us. Yep, that's right, Gloria. Chinese man on the bridge. Gloria, I've been wondering where the major denominations have been during this anti-Asian hate and xenophobia. Just sad and disappointed. Me too, Gloria.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say another, I'm going to put another question with that, Mihi.
Mhm.
So Joy Lau says, thanks for hosting it. She wanted us to talk a little bit about white adjacency, which I think we did. I certainly don't see how my personal experience of that of my family is white adjacent. This rather harmful myth came from the Asian culture preference for lighter skin. So that's colorism. Mihi, do you want to say anything more about that? About colorism and white, like getting closer to whiteness? Do you want to say anything about that? Thank you, Joy and Gloria.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are very aesthetic and physical ways that whiteness operates,
Yeah.
and it wants to see it self-represented in, I mean, it's a form of sort of assimilation. If bodies are sort of submitting to this ideal of whiteness physically in their bodies, then it's winning and it's working, this ideal, this standard. And so I think white adjacency is not just about colorism. I think it is about sort of this proximity to privilege, which is connected to, can be connected to this understanding of how Asians are constructed as the model minority within the US. And that's, again, always sort of in relationship to anti-Black racism, because it's again about assimilation and progress and exceptionalism and success, and a way to sort of further oppress and disenfranchise Black people and communities, to show them that, I mean, people have literally said this, look, the Asians have made it, are successful, and can behave. Why can't you?
What's wrong with y'all? Yeah. That's our favorite, right, everybody? Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's how I understand white adjacency. But I think that is related to colorism too. I mean, that's just another sort of, just a physical sort of
Manifestation of.
yeah.
uh,
Right.
Yeah, the standards of beauty, and the standards of, a long time ago when I was a little person, I read a bio by a Black tennis player, right? Black like me. Like, who was he playing tennis in the world, right? Team, can you help Ben get a question out here? Ben,
Well,
I'm asking.
without questions from as people are thinking, Jacqui, I was just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit also about, I'm trying to phrase this the right way, but the ways that uh, anti-Asian bigotry is also fostered in Black communities by white supremacy to provide an alternate locus for Black rage, as opposed to, you know, the place where rage is rightfully deserved, which is, you know, this system of white supremacy that's keeping people down. The ways that, you know, whiteness is so good at pitting folks against each other rather than at the source of power.
Yeah, that's good, Ben. And you did say that well. That's a hard thing to say. I'm so sad and disappointed, just to say out loud, um, that some of the violence that we've seen, you know, in the media has been Black, somebody beating somebody Asian or pushing someone down Asian. And I was in California for a while, Mihee, and that living in the Bay Area, it was just the weirdest thing in the world. This would have been late 80s, you know, mid to late 80s. And the weirdest thing in the world was both how, no kidding, go to a restaurant or go to the disco, which is what it was called then. And the place would be like the most multi-ethnic, right? Asian, Black, Latinx, white people just dancing and having a good time, or eating and they were having a good time on the one hand. And on the other hand, you could drive through a neighborhood and feel the daggers, right? From Asians to Blacks and Blacks to Asians and Latinx people to Black. Like all of these ethnic pockets of rage and hurt and sorrow. And I do think that some of that had to do with just history and riots and things that had happened, and the very personal experiences that somebody had. Somebody, you know, broke into that hair care store. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
somebody said, why do the Koreans own the hair care stores? Why don't Black people own it, right? You know, somebody said, why do the Latinx people own the bodega? And it would be a very personal, local moment before we get to Rodney King. And that really blew up Southern California. But
Yeah.
before that, it seemed to me that a personal, local story would travel like wildfire. And it would be they, the big pronoun they. And there would be rage and anger, and like to where then it would come to work with you. And Ben, this was before I had done a whole lot of reading about it, but it did feel to me that, you know, white supremacy in the nation had squeezed everybody so much that people were just angry and desperate. And so you sort of turned to the one, psychologically now I would say, you turned to the one with the least power that you could get.
Yeah.
And you kicked their ass, right? So you know, even some Black people to me say, like, make sure you talk about Black on Black crime. I'm like, okay, make sure you talk about making neighborhoods where Black children are not poor and desperate and have polices in the school. Do you know what I mean? And don't have enough food and go to school angry and pissed. And then talk to me about Black on Black crime, because what all that happens is you turn to the weakest one that you can conquer. Your friend with the shoes, or the gang, right? Or you, and so I felt like in these ethnic communities, Mihee and Ben, that there was like, who's not white, whose ass you can kick? Like, who can you get? And so it might have been perceived that the Asian store owner was less powerful. It might have been perceived that that woman on the corner was less powerful. It might have been perceived that that young gang member was less powerful. But I thought it was about power and proximity and pain that were causing these skirmishes that then became like lore.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what that is. It's because always that. Well, no, it's not. It's that, Mr. Yee's store got burned down, right? And people are
Yeah.
angry about that. It seemed like
Yeah.
it played into this narrative that was already at work, and children were beginning to play the role inside the narrative.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense,
Yeah.
y'all? Um, so I don't think that's all it is, but I think like that guy on the train, the J train, like that story, people are filming it, which by the way, can someone stop something? But they're
Yeah.
filming it and they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then someone goes, well, he called him the N-word. I'm like, well, that
Yeah.
doesn't make it actually really okay. but why did he call him the N-word? And what, you know what I mean? Like, what's the dynamic before that causes in today's context, anybody Asian to call anybody Black on the train the N-word
Mm.
for any reason? What did you interject that
Right.
made you do that? And what did the Black man interject that made him so unbelievably furious and understandably hurt? But like, I'm
Yeah.
way oversimplifying.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, I'm thinking about like, you're making me think of how these are scripts that we are all following. Like,
Yeah,
we are performing and playing out this drama that
right.
is about white supremacy. And how can we stop being pawns? Like, how do we completely break out of that structure? Is the question. And I think that I've been reading a little bit more lately about women of color feminisms and about Black and Asian feminist solidarities. And I think like that is a start. To me, that it feels like church and preaching the gospel. And because these are sort of coalitional strategies
Right.
that aren't based on trying to find some kind of similarity or commonality, but because we recognize the complexity of all these differences, that our experiences of violence and oppression are never going to be mirror to each other or exactly the same. But we gather and we stand up for one another because of those differences.
That's right. And I would just say, me, and you tell me if this is a helpful edit to what you just said, which I thought was so smart and right. Also, what we do have in common is that we live in a nation where whiteness is valued more than any of us.
Yeah.
That we do have in common.
Yeah.
If we could make that like a gathering, talk about go to church on that.
Mm.
It's really fascinating at Middle Church. I think that I always say our white people at Middle Church are against white supremacy, which I think is a good good thing. But how do you bond around? Let's say it more positively. Can we bond around a shared dream, a shared vision of an equitable nation
Mm-hmm.
in which racism is a pastime paradigm?
Yeah.
Where can we agree on that? And how can we build relationships around that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's what continues to compel me about Middle Church is just that constant drive towards that goal. And even as you all are trying to do that, like you're embodying it as well. It's that kind of already not yet sort of
Yeah. 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 We got work to do.
mm,
We have
Is that you, Ben? Go,
yeah,
Ben.
yeah. We have another question. I don't know if you want to jump in on this, Mihee. Somebody asking about recommended reading for deeper understanding of Asian American, Pacific Islander, Desi American stories. Do you have some books you might want to lift up for people who are listening?
yeah, I mean, there's just so much out there. And I mean, I think I'm actually trying to put together a syllabus, like an honor Asian women. So really focusing on Asian women in America and their experiences. That kind of a resource inspired by Lemonade syllabus by Candice Benbow.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But so like I mentioned earlier, Helen Zha's Asian American Dreams just tells like she weaves like personal narratives. She has this journalistic background. And so the stories just reads like just a wonderful, easy narrative. Not easy, but like super accessible
Right.
in all the sort of complicated nuances. And then I'm a big fan of, because she's also a dear friend, but also because she's brilliant, Ellen Wu, The Color of Success, talks about how exactly the model minority myth, she like really complicates it for us, because it's not just something that was imposed on Asians in America, but something that Asians in America really embraced, as sort of this process of, as a part of assimilating, of defining, as part of their own sort of self-determination. And so yeah, just a really, really interesting way of thinking about, and anything by like Elaine Kim, she's a literary person, or scholar out of Berkeley. There's The Making of Asian America. I'm totally blanking on the name, even though I can see her face. Maybe Erica Lee. Is that right? I'm gonna have to. I feel terrible because now I'm being recorded, and it's just. And what's funny is that I keep seeing ads for her book come up everywhere.
Yeah.
Erica Lee, yes, The Making of Asian America, yeah, I mean, those are some books that I would start out with, that I'm sure have really amazing and extensive bibliographies too.
And what do you think about the PBS documentary about
Oh
Asian?
God, you
It's great.
have to watch it. Yeah, you have to watch it. I feel like I'm going to watch it. I'm technically on a solo vacation right now, and I think I'm going to watch just the whole thing from start to finish again.
How did you get a solo vacation? What?
No, I know it's a gift, and I'll just do a shout out to my spouse, Andy Court, my
Yay.
colleague and spouse at the church, who is holding down the fort with our 3 children and all their sports practices and virtual school. But yes, I was like, I have to get away after Easter, and I want to just be in a hotel room and watch TV and go on long walks. And so that's what I'm doing this week.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you don't see like kids like running around screaming and yelling and, you know, coming up and making faces at the
And then
camera.
do you give him the same thing back, or?
Yeah, I mean, since we're colleagues, we have to sort of schedule and make sure that everybody gets like their weeks. So I think he's got one he's doing in June for a week.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to know if there are any other questions, or if my staff, I got good staff hanging around there. Amanda or Ben or Eric, anybody else have a question for Mihee? Thank you, Imelda. I'm so glad to see you. Yeah. I have one for Mihee then. My question is more like it's again really to the personal as political. How old are your children?
I have twins that are 10. So boy, girl twins, Desmond and Ann are 10. And then Ozzy is 8.
Fantastic. So it's 20 years from now, and your kids are, grown, maybe they have some kids. What's your dream for America, Mihee? What do you see? What do you want to see?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. My goodness. You know, just for my kids to be in communities that are thriving, where everybody's flourishing. You know, if they get married, great. If they don't, fine. Kids or no kids. I mean, we don't even talk in those terms, because that's not the most important thing. And even in terms of jobs, that's not the most important thing. I mean, like our boys are talking about, first we're going to play in the NBA for a few years, and then, then we're going to be engineers or something, things that I've never said or where it comes from.
Right.
But, for them to be contributing, not contributing members of society, but contributing to the flourishing of their neighbors. And
I love that, Mihee. The flourishing of their neighbors.
Yeah. I want there to be different kinship structures, and for that to just be totally normal, queer families for sure, to be just regular families. And, I'm sure that, I need somebody to give me grandbabies already. I need some babies. I'm not right now. I mean, they're 10 and 8, but I'm envisioning it in the future. however they give it to me.
That's great.
But yeah, for the flourishing of, yeah, the people around them, not just for themselves, not just for a certain sort of sector of society, but for everyone.
I love that. And I think there's just a little addition to the question as someone wants to know, Mihee, what do you think faith communities can do to make those dreams come true? What can faith communities do?
Yeah, that's great. I've been thinking a lot about, because I've been so inspired by this particular network in Bloomington, Indiana, which had started, which it just got going, especially during COVID, but before COVID started. But it's this wonderful mutual aid network. And there's something about that particular that structure of care that's in place where there's no programs, there's no task forces, there's no applications. People just say what they need, and then whoever can provide that for that need, just do it. And I wonder if there's a way for faith communities to do that more effectively. I think that faith communities do that. I think there's still too much corporate, institutional, bureaucratic stuff that gets in the way.
Yeah.
And I just want faith communities to be freer, in loving and caring for everyone.
That's beautiful, Mihee. Well, I am dreaming that in a couple more years, 3 or 4 more years, we've been so kind of undone and outraged by what we're seeing right now on the national stage in our neighborhoods and our communities, that we almost like in a way feel like we've hit bottom. Like, oh, we're not that. We're not going to do that anymore. And we just get better. We just love each other better and make more connections and get out of our silos and get more vulnerable and tell the truth to each other. And to let everybody know who's with us tonight, if you want to come talk about some dreams, Middle's 15th Annual Justice Conference, Revolutionary Love, The Courage to Imagine, is next week. Holy cow, Mihee.
Wow.
April 15 to 18. We made the tickets so COVID affordable for everybody.
Yeah.
So like $75 for 3 days of badassery. Just speakers from all kinds of genres. You can go to revolutionaryloveconference.com. Revolutionary Love Conference, if you do it, it'll come up, and see the amazing, from Brian McLaren to Valerie Kaur to music by Ani DeFranco to Ruby Sales to Linda Sarsour to Wajahat Ali. It's just, Asians, Latinx, Blacks, whites, queer folks, Indigenous. It's just going to be great. So please come. We put that in the chat, and we'd love to have you. And Mihee is going to be preaching at Middle Church on May 9. So we're excited to have Reverend Mihee to come preach and bring us another word. Thank you for being you in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. And thanks for this space and for your work and leadership and just yeah, you give so much. Just showing up the way that you do is just such a gift to all of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you all. And thank you all for taking some time to come be with us tonight. And we're so grateful that you're here. Just thank you so much. And wherever you are, what's your dream for a healed and whole world? You got the stuff, honey, to manifest it, to make it happen. So speak it out loud, dream it out loud, pray it out loud, hold it up for yourself as something to lean into, and let's make the world better all by ourselves. This has been Shattering Invisibility, speaking ourselves into view.